it's really great to be with all of you today. Clearly, we're living in unprecedented times. Everything that we know about how we have been connecting and communicating and navigating our lives has certainly changed, and we're rapidly adapting. And one of the things that we've really been thrust into is to meet virtually. You know, we're not together with our staffs necessarily, or our peers, our board members. And so we've had to get up the learning curve pretty quickly. And that's why we thought we would kick off this webinar series that we're calling Navigating the New Normal, with a focus on taming virtual meetings. And that title came to me pretty quickly because I think that's all how we feel. It's like the wild, wild west of various platforms. And we're going to hope to wrestle some of those to the ground for you today and talk about how to be most effective in relaying information through your virtual meetings. And so that's our focus today. So again, we are talking about taming virtual meetings, key steps for success. We're all been thrust into it. And today we're just going to take a step back and talk about how we can be most effective and what are some of the best practices. So I'll move quickly to the next slide. And just a little more about my company, should you be interested. But as Ian said, I have more than 30 years of experience in organizational association management. And I am now helping agencies all around the state and the country, and really enjoying that. And of course, my long time with Aqua, definitely love that role, and it introduced me to NWRA, which I've been a fan of for decades actually. So it's really fun to collaborate with you all on this today. All right, next. So before we launch, we want to make sure everybody knows how to use the platform that this very Zoominar, is what I'm calling it, is being brought to you by. So it's being brought to you by Zoom. NWRA is using the professional version, which has a cost to it. I want to make sure you know the features that are right in front of you so that we can all have the best experience possible. So if you haven't already figured this out, at the top right, you'll see that little box, and you want to select gallery view so that you can see everyone who's on the call with us today on the Zoominar. And then if you're interested in seeing the names of the participants, just by clicking the participant box, you can do that. That's on the bottom of your screen. You want to see that your camera is actually on. If there's a red circle around it and a line through it, we can't see you. Maybe you don't want us to see you, and that's okay too. But it's fun for us to all kind of get a feel for who's on the call today or on the Zoominar. And as Ian said, all the participants will be on mute for this Zoominar, but we do have the chat feature. And if you see that little icon at the bottom of your screen, it's like a little bubble. That's what we'll be using to collect your questions, and we'll be answering those questions at the end of the Zoominar. And of course, there's also, you can have some fun with the little react icon also at the bottom of your screen if you want to interact that way during the Zoominar. All right. So moving on to our agenda for today, which is our next slide. This is what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about choosing a platform. We're going to talk about getting organized so that we use best practices, and then facilitating our meeting, and then we'll have a question and answer segment. We're going to try to move through this fairly quickly today. All right, so next, choosing a platform. You might wonder why we're using Zoom today. We'll get into why. But no matter what you choose, the very first step and thought process to go through is, what is the purpose of your virtual meeting? Is this something that you're doing just to bring people together to provide updates? Is it more of a formal presentation? You know, what's the nature of what you want to do through your virtual meeting? So you're going to think that through. Is it informal or is it more casual? Next, you want to think about the audience. Of course, it's always about the audience. So is it an internal audience? Is it your staff? Or is it external? Is it your board members? Is it a larger community group? Is it a group of your peers? You know, think through the type of audience that you want to bring together virtually. And then you want to think through the group size. That's also a critical piece when you get into certain platforms, whether it's a free version or a version you need to pay for. Also the time needed for your session. That's important both in terms of whether you're going with a free version or something you're paying for, but also in how you want to structure your meeting. And the content. Is it just one person presenting? Are there lots of people that are going to be talking? Do you have multiple speakers, that kind of thing? And what type of content are you relaying? Are you training your staff or are you just doing updates? Another important consideration. And we want to talk about security too, because many of you are public water agencies, right? Some of these platforms are better than others for security. And likely the free versions are versions that you could use with some groups, but for others, you may want to have a higher level of security. And always you want to consider the technical support provided through the platform, but also the technical support that you're going to have working with you to conduct the virtual meeting. You want to be sure that whatever platform you use, that they provide regular upgrades to that platform. Because again, as I said, wild, wild west out there with the volume of users. Even the best platforms have had struggles. And so they are changing the platforms in real time. I love that word. And they're upgrading it. So those are some considerations when you go to think about what kind of platform you want to use for what type of virtual meeting. All right, next, we're going to talk about Zoom. And I think you've all seen that image that's on your screen there to the right. All the faces, you know, the late night talk shows, the virtual concerts we've all been taking part in. It's kind of probably going to be a defining visual for what we are all, you know, enduring together through this pandemic. And so we're talking about Zoom first. And you might say, well, why are you talking about Zoom and why are you using Zoom? Well, it is the most popular platform out there. And I've been saying this a lot. I wish I would have bought stock a long time ago in Zoom. And the reason it's so popular is obvious. It's free and it's easy, right? So those are some really basic things that people are looking for right now. And when I say that, I mean it's very easy to use. It's internet-based. There's nothing that needs to be downloaded. And right now I'm talking more about the basic level version that's free. But some of the other versions that they offer also have these same features. Really high quality audio and video right off the bat. There's simple screen sharing like what we're doing here with the PowerPoint. The meetings can be recorded. You can do instant meetings, log on right away, or you can schedule them. And you can also do that real-time messaging through the chat feature. So what are some of the cons? You can't do real-time document sharing where you're passing things back and forth. Again, this is at the basic free level. The time limit for the free version is 40 minutes. Of course, as you move up to the other levels, they have 3 other levels, there are opportunities for much bigger time frames that you can avail yourself to. And they have had at the free level some issues with hacking. They just released a brand new version night before last. So they're really working on that, even for the free version. But again, there's 3 additional versions. There's also a webinar version. If you think you're going to be doing webinars, that's going to be a version you want to consider, because it allows, if you had multiple sessions going on, you can actually do breakout rooms. It's really interesting. But for all of those other versions outside the free version, there are monthly costs that range anywhere from $14.99 to $40 a month, and that's per user. And then the cost for the webinar version, you'll need to look into that to see the kinds of features that you want, but that also would be a monthly cost. So that's Zoom. Again, most popular platform being used right now. Now we're going to move on to Skype, which is kind of the predecessor to Zoom. It is business friendly. It is too easy to use. It's internet based. It's got an instant start feature and can be viewed mobilely on an app. Easy screen and document sharing as well, and the meetings can be recorded. It is part of the Microsoft Office Package 365. So if you have that, you've already got it at no additional cost. And if you need to use or offer a separate phone feature, that's not included in the platform. So that's additional. And there's other features that you can pay for in addition. But I would say it's kind of the predecessor to Zoom. The beauty of it, though, is if you have Office 365, that might be a consideration, and you may want to use that platform. Next up is a platform called GoToMeetings. Now, this is a bit more of a formal webinar type platform. It's not new. It's been around for quite a while, but it offers a lot of things that you might think are important depending on the group that you're virtually meeting with. It has a high degree of control. You can take control, you can give control to other speakers that might be involved in your meeting. Again, you can do that at higher levels with Zoom, but that's a kind of a nice benefit to the GoToMeetings platform. It also has some of the nice benefits, as we talked about with Zoom, such as the internet-based feature, the app-friendly options, screen and document sharing are also available. The meetings can be recorded, and you can have a lot of attendees. Again, there are packages and levels with GoToMeeting. You do need a fast internet connection, again, because there's just more to it. There's more options. And depending on how many folks you have in your office or your organization that need to be able to schedule meetings or conduct meetings simultaneously. You want to go back one. Still, Ian, we're still on that one. There you go. You'll have to pay for multiple licenses. So that's something to keep in mind. It's a little more expensive. Also, those that would be participating on GoToMeetings, if they haven't done so, they have to download it before they participate. So that's also kind of a different threshold for participation than as we discussed with Zoom, which is instant, and all you have to do is click a link to get on. Now we're going to talk about Teams. Teams is relatively new, but has quickly become very popular. It is a Microsoft product also, part of that 365 package. And where this is really being heavily used right now is internally as a work productivity business tool, very team oriented. So I know a lot of folks that are using this with their staffs right now. All the tools are in place because it's a Microsoft product. So you can kind of move pretty easily between the other Microsoft programs like Excel, etc., PowerPoint, all of those other things, Word. So they're all integrated into this platform. It's easy to share documents. and screens with your team members starts to grow a little bit in complexity. So you do need to have somebody that kind of avails themselves to this program and learns it if they're going to be helping you with it. It is internet-based again, but you have to download it first. And then from there, you can send out those links. It's interesting, it's got a language translation feature, and that can be very important with certain companies, depending on the variety and diversity of your team. And again, it is part of that Office 365 package. Again, needs to be downloaded. So on the con side, it doesn't have as optimal an online meeting experience. I've got an image for you there. You see 4 faces, and you can only see 4 faces at a time with Teams. You can still see to the side everyone that's participating in terms of their names are listed, but you won't be able to see everyone like you can with Zoom and Skype and possibly some of the brand new products that came out last week from Google and even Facebook. So if you want to be able to have that optimized experience, you can think that through as well. But Teams is a very good platform for doing business. Next, we don't want to lose the thread of the tried and true, right? So, hey, we've all been doing conference calls for a lot of years, conducting a lot of business, and that good old Polycom there, that little image of the Polycom, still works. And, you know, maybe you don't need to see people virtually. Maybe there's virtual fatigue in your organization, and you can conduct business on a topic that might be very, you know, sort of narrowly focused, and you can have a conference call, right? Easy to use. You probably have one of these components. And there is the possibility of a virtual piece to the Polycon. You have to have cameras, but it is adaptable for visual images, but it takes some additional components to do that. You know, for the most part, the good old Polycon is glitch-free, I would say. You do have to have your conference call service, obviously, and you have to schedule the calls. You have to send the links out, just like you do with the virtual platforms. But you can't see each other if that's something you really want to have happen. You can't really share documents. So what you do, as you may have been doing already, is you send the documents in advance, and you kind of all walk through the paper documents in front of you. And as I said before, you have to have that call-in number. And so there is scheduling involved in getting that information out in advance. And I've got a picture of a phone. And I know none of us have a phone that looks like that anymore, but it's a bit of nostalgia as we think about better days. But hey, the phone still works. Our phones, now iPhones, or whatever kind of a small phone that you are using, they still work too. And I know that I've gotten to the point with folks, clients even, just pick up the phone, you know, have a conversation. That still works. And again, I think there's something about the fatigue of doing so much virtually that sometimes that can give people a break as well. So we still have that tool, and it still can help us communicate effectively. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some best practices of taming virtual meetings. And of course, we all have been conducting meetings, but what I would say about the getting organized piece of this is it's even more critical in the virtual setting, because you can't run next door to grab whatever document. You got to really think through what you're going to need for the meeting. Everybody has to have access to that. So the organization piece is pretty critical. One of the things that's really nice about most of the features that I went through, and many more that are available to you, is obviously they have an online scheduling feature for setting up the meeting, but many of them also have an email component So you can send an email right from that platform as you are announcing the meeting being held. But you can also copy and paste all of the meeting information with the links and the passwords, just like you would with a conference call, and send that out via email. So you've got some options there. One of the things that I really have trained my folks to do over the years is make the subject line count, and that first paragraph in your email communication that you're sending out to bring people in and invite them to the meeting. Tell them the subject very clearly and the date and the time in the subject line. And I think why this is, it's sort of a, well, of course type of thing, but again, with the amount, the volume of email, the volume of virtual meetings that are going on, you don't want people to miss things. You can also use features like Outlook to do an additional check on setting up the call so that it goes to people's calendars. Many of the platforms allow you to do that as well through Google, email, or Outlook, so you can choose those options too. We want to make sure that we clearly state what the meeting expectations are in that initial communication. Why are we getting together? What do we hope to accomplish? And this is something that I have both done and I've participated in. If you're, for example, having to do a staff training, or you're presenting information on a brand new project, you know there's going to be a lot of questions. And in the spirit of not trying to keep people on the phone on the virtual call, I should say, for hours, consider breaking it into 2 sessions. I've done this, and I have to tell you, it works really effectively. So you have a virtual meeting dedicated to the presentation of the content. And then you collect through that chat feature, or maybe they'll send you questions through email. You collect all of that, and then maybe the next day or the day after that, you have session 2 where you're walking through all of the questions that have been put on the table. That way you have a little time. Maybe there's some additional information you're going to need to collect so that you can respond to the questions. So I would, just encourage you to think through. That's a way to keep a meeting more concise at the outset, and then come back and walk through the Q&A portion. And again, both of those can be recorded and they can be shared after the fact. So, additional things for getting organized. Obviously, you want to develop an agenda, and we all do that, right, with any meeting that we have. But I think it's even more critical, and most board meetings are conducted this way for you all. But, let's have time increments. Let's do a run of show kind of document so it's really clear who's kicking off the meeting, who's handling all the different topics, and the timing for each of those topics. Again, you want to provide everything that you can in advance, very important. And you want to clarify the call etiquette. And I don't know if any of you saw the Saturday Night Live skit on virtual meeting etiquette, but if you haven't, you probably want to go back and check it out on YouTube. Anything can happen on these virtual calls, although we have gotten a bit more used to it, but it's important to kind of spell that out in your communication. Is it a casual meeting? Are we wearing Hawaiian shirts or not? Is it more formal? There used to be the time, and it was only a couple months ago, where we would have a meeting and we'd eat our lunch during the meeting. Is that something that's okay for your virtual meeting? Do you mind if people are eating? It's a little different when we're all like on our own little screen and we're eating, right? Is that more distracting? Could it be more distracting? Are the pets invited to the meeting? I've seen a lot of pets. I've seen a lot of kids. And in some settings, I think that's great. And in fact, it reinforces we're all going through the same thing here, right? But just give everyone the idea of what your expectation is for etiquette. Is it okay to wear their jammies to the meeting? Just think that through. It's good to draft talking points to help you conduct that meeting virtually. Again, just then you're looking at the camera. and you want to be looking and engaging your audience. So really rehearsing that. Tech support on hand as you're conducting the meeting. For some of those platforms that I mentioned, really all of them, it's very important to have some support. If you're the one conducting the meeting, you can't be troubleshooting technical problems that other people that are participating might be having. So you want to make sure somebody is there to help you. Very good idea, and we did this, to conduct a dry run. Conduct a dry run and log on early to make sure your speakers, and encourage them to do the same if you've got different speakers on your meeting, so that we can all be testing our audio and our video early before the call and the meeting are initiated. And think about your virtual background. I have to say, you're in my office, and I had to clean it up before this virtual meeting, right? Not that it was overly messy, but I wanted to make sure it was presentable behind me. And you want to think about, is it a distracting visual? I have a fan above my head that I would love to have on right now, but that would have been really distracting for all of you. So think about that. Think about the lighting. It's really important that you check out the lighting. Is your face going to be washed out? They say it's better to have the light in front of your face. So think about that. So you have, especially if you're conducting a meeting or a webinar, you want that to be as visually pleasing as possible. All right, now we're going to move on to facilitating that meeting. So I am kind of a believer in this. I know it's not always possible, but keeping your meetings to 1 hour or less is optimal. And again, thinking about maybe you can break it up into a couple of sessions if possible. You want to start and end on time. And we all know that there's so many meetings going on, that's pretty critical. We advise to do a roll call if you need to recognize everyone that's on, or use that participant feature. I can see all the names of the folks that are on this Zoominar right now. Another thing you can do though, because there's a limitation, we can see your name, but I can't see your title. I don't know necessarily your title or your organization. So another tool that you might think about is developing a little table, sending that out in advance, or even a list. Here's who's going to be on. Here's their title and the organization they're representing. What you don't want to do is self-intros, especially if you have more than just a handful of people, because it's cutting into your meeting time. So think about as much as you can do other ways to keep that timing short. And you want to give your participants something visual to look at, something that keeps everybody moving through your content together. We're all in this together, right? So we want to reinforce the content visually. You know, you can use video. There's a lot of things you can use, but you know, PowerPoint, good old PowerPoint, works very well to help everyone move through that meeting together. And a few more points here on facilitating a meeting. You want to use those participation features, just like we're doing today. The reaction button. Some of the other platforms like GoToMeetings has a raised hand feature. They also have a chat feature. So there's a lot of these tools available on all the different platforms. And it really helps to conduct even large groups. I've been on calls with 1,000 people recently that have been conducted through Instagram. I would not advise using Instagram. This was more of a fun thing. It doesn't have a great connection, but the more people you have, the more it can get bogged down. So you want to control the meeting, and you want to mute the participants, but it's wonderful to see everyone's faces. And that's a great way for us to continue to connect. Some folks like to use their official professional beauty photo instead of being in real time. That's fine too, but I think it's more fun to see all the faces. With a virtual meeting, really any meeting, but again, I think it's so critical when you're in the virtual environment, you want to recap action items, both before you conclude the call, if you can. Again, that's where having some assistance is really important, but going through and quickly recapping maybe more generally. And then after the virtual meeting, you send out the recording because maybe some folks missed it with any and all materials that were used in the meeting, and those action items with maybe information on the next meeting that you are planning to have. So folks can get that on their calendar. So send the package out, thank everybody for being involved in the virtual meeting, and give them the content in case they missed being able to participate themselves. So recapping, you want to think about that platform. Most importantly, your purpose, your audience, your timing, what you need to be able to do on your virtual meeting. And that will help guide the platform that you choose. You want to be very organized and set everything up, best practices for your meeting. And you want to conduct that dry run to make sure your camera works, your audio works, everything works, and make sure all your team members that are going to be helping you are on the dry run. And then you want to facilitate your meeting, moving through the meeting in an organized fashion, keeping folks on mute, encouraging them to use the chat features and those other features. And then as a follow-up, you want to record. You will have recorded the meeting, so you want to send out that recording, any and all content that was a part of that meeting, or even additional things that you think would be helpful that were part of that discussion, and those action items in writing as part of your follow-up. And I'm sure many of you, I know I have been, we've been using these virtual platforms to connect socially or with our families, our friends, our peers. It's been a really interesting experience, all these themed events, birthdays. My husband is retiring Keith Coolidge next week, and so he's getting a lot of virtual goodbyes. So use it, use it as a way to connect.